Hey, welcome back. My name is Mike, and welcome to the Happy Trekkers channel. I am talking to John Smulo today, who lives in Cebu City, Philippines. He's actually from America, so he's another American expat, but he lives over there now. And let's welcome him to the show. So welcome, John. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your channel and really looking forward to our interview.
All right, so tell us, John, now you're from California? Is that where you came from?
Yes.
What part of California?
I was born in Los Angeles, but was living in San Francisco before I moved to the Philippines, and probably spent half of my life in Southern California and half in Northern by this time.
Oh, so you got the best of both worlds there.
Absolutely.
Then tell us then, you live in California, which well, it depends, I guess, who you talk to, but a lot of people would say, why would you leave California? It's beautiful. It's got everything you want. Why would you go from California all the way to the Philippines?
Sure. Well, as you can imagine, there's probably a woman involved, and my story definitely has that. My fiance is here, Grace. She's from the Philippines, and so really it was us meeting. So that was the biggest reason. But also, I was, even before we met, looking at the Philippines to open up a second office for my California-based company. So I have a digital marketing agency there, and had been working with people, outsourced contractors in Vietnam and India and a number of different countries, including Philippines. And after years of doing that and being awake during California time, working with clients, and then being up at night, working with contractors overseas, it really got exhausting, literally.
Yeah.
And so some years back, I started to think, well, what if I open up an office in another country where I could have managers and HR and project managers overseeing employees? And so I started to look at the Philippines even before we met, but it was really a perfect fit. So before I officially moved here, Grace took over, and with the hiring and setting up the corporation and all of those things. And so really was those two reasons, love and business. Those were my two reasons for coming over to the Philippines.
It's the perfect marriage. I know it's not marriage yet, but it's the perfect marriage, love and business. Why not?
Yes, absolutely.
So now, had you visited before you started setting up the agent, or before you started setting up the office?
So I had not. So I had worked with people in the Philippines for years previously, and even some of our employees at our office in the Bay Area originally came from the Philippines. So I was really familiar with Filipino culture and had a number of friends and employees. But my first time coming here was July of 2019. And that was meeting my fiance for the first time, and also starting the process of opening up a corporation here as well. So I came here 3 times in 2019.
Okay.
And it's really a bit of work for a foreigner to set up a business here in the Philippines. So getting easier now. And then I moved here January of 2020.
The obvious question is, how do you like it?
I love it. I really love it. There's, I think, in every culture, some things that take some time to get used to. And certainly that's the case in the Philippines as well. But there's nowhere I'd rather live right now. So I definitely miss California when it comes to convenience and Mexican food, and more than anything, my family. But I really love living in the Philippines.
A lot of people think of retiring to these other places around the world. You're clearly not retired. You're a working professional. So your visa situation may be different, right?
That's right. So when you're, actually, I should say you're right. The overwhelming majority of people that come from other parts of the world, especially places like the US or Canada, Australia, England, they tend to come here to retire. Right. And so, you know, I'm kind of the young guy, even though I'm not so young anymore, because I'm, you know, I definitely still have to work here, and I started a restaurant here. So I'm looking at other business opportunities here as well. But with visa, it's very easy for anybody to just hop over to the Philippines on a tourist, well, just with your passport. You don't even need a tourist visa if you come from the US, at least. at least at this time of the video. So if anybody's watching this a bit later, make sure and check that's still the case. But
Good point.
you basically could come over here and stay for 3 years currently.
Oh.
You just have to keep getting renewals of a tourist visa. And then after the 3 years, you just need to leave for a day and then hop right back for another 3 years. So there's expats that have lived here for a decade that have been doing that. However, you know, there's a class of visa called SRRV visas, where there's different ways that you can apply to stay here a bit longer. So, for example, one of them is if you have 10 employees or more, you're able to apply for one of the type of SRRV visas. So there's a lot of options, but I would say if anybody's thinking about coming to the Philippines for a month or two, or even a year, just come on over on a tourist, you know, just your normal passport. I can't even really necessarily call it a tourist visa. You do have to renew and get an extension, but it's at the moment very lax here for people to come over and live.
How often do you have to get that extension?
So it starts off after a month, and then mostly it really depends. So I've had anywhere between 1 month at a time and 6 months at a time. It's not a lot of rhyme or reason sometimes, but for people I would expect to be at immigration for about 3 hours every 1 to 6 months.
Okay, which isn't terrible. I mean, the fact that you can stay for 3 months, or I'm sorry, for 3 years, and just sort of keep renewing that, there's a lot of countries, there's no way you can pull that off. So you have to get out. And come back perhaps, but you have to physically leave and then make those border runs to the nearest country and fly back in. But to go 3 years is actually quite a long time.
Yeah, the Philippines, I would say, is very hospitable to people that want to come and stay here. And I hope it stays that way for a long time. I am starting to see videos about Vietnam right now where people had lived there for 8, 9 years and all of a sudden they're not renewing visas. So I hope that situation never happens in the Philippines, but it's a great place to come very easily to stay.
No kidding. You mentioned employees. I want to touch on that because you obviously have a company there, but you're not a citizen. So is there any challenges around that?
There is. So up until pretty recently, if you wanted to own a business in the Philippines, you could only be 40% owner. And then there would be Philippine citizens that would need to make up the other 60%. And often, very often, the Filipino citizens might be an employee, or they might be your neighbor, or they might be a friend. And it really led to not always ideal situations.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yes, because the Filipino citizens normally would just be on the paperwork, kind of in name only, but really they were the majority owners. Often they wouldn't have access to bank accounts. It was just messy. And so starting in March of 2019, the Philippines government started a new type of corporation, which is called a one-person corporation, or OPC, and that allows people, including foreigners, to be able to 100% own a corporation in the Philippines. So my first company here, Purple Cow Agency, which is a business process outsourcing company here, and the sister company to my Purple Cow Agency marketing company in California, is a one-person corporation. So it works out really well. If anybody's interested in starting a business over here, I have a video where I interview an attorney on my channel about that one-person corporation if people want to find out more.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that we put a link to that in the description. That's a great, because I was thinking, like you said, prior to 19, as I mentioned, I don't know if I've mentioned it on the recording, but my wife was born in the Philippines, but she moved here when she was 3. Her mother's Filipino. So she got her citizenship when she was a teenager, and she had eventually had dropped her Filipino, but she now, as full-grown adults, she can go back and get her dual citizenship. And we've always thought, well, she could do that, and that would free us up for all these little problems, owning a business, owning land, all these other things she would now qualify for. But it's very interesting to know that that's not even necessarily needed now from owning a business perspective.
That's right. So there is certain types of businesses where foreigners are not able to have that one-person corporation or own them. And I forget exactly all of the ones that those are, but most of the common types of businesses that you would want to have, foreigners would be able to have that as well. So right now, the only thing that is kind of a big deal that foreigners aren't able to do here now, as you mentioned, is own land.
Right.
So you have to be a citizen to still own land.
So tell me, how do you deal with that in terms of not owning land? Now you live in a pretty large city, right? Cebu is pretty large, right?
Yes. Definitely not like Manila, but I believe it's the second largest city here. And before I lived in San Francisco and the Bay Area, it's very populated and there's definitely growth. But just looking out my window here, I'm up in the 21st floor. I can see about 12 cranes building high rises. So Cebu's really growing very quickly. Yeah, far more than anywhere I've seen in California. But in terms of land, I've just chosen not to buy a house. So we bought a condo because I could own that.
Yeah.
But definitely my fiance and I are looking at buying some land as well. She'll own that. But you could really get a lot more property in a bigger place if you have some land and a home here.
True. But I think you're pretty typical of a lot of people. Like I said, I have a friend in Thailand, and they have something similar where the land becomes a little bit of a problem, but so many people just buy a condo like you did. And you can buy the condo, right? You're not just renting it. You can actually outright own it because you don't actually own the land, kind of like in America. We don't own the land of the condo. We own the unit within the building. Very similar, right?
It's exactly the same. So that's why I chose to do that. It's just a little bit less complicated. I could own it here in the same way that I would own a condo in California, and just seemed like kind of an easier option to begin with.
Right. Okay, so let's talk costs, because that's obviously one of the first things everyone wants to know is the cost of living. Now, obviously, you're coming from California, and we both know it's pretty expensive regardless of where you live in California. There's no real cheap area of California.
That's right.
I grew up in Florida, and my mortgage in Florida is way less than my rent in my apartment here. I still have a big house with a pool and all that in Florida. I wish I could pay that here, but it would cost a fortune. So going to the Philippines, give me a sense of what kind of what are you spending for a condo? I mean, you can give me ranges. You don't have to give me your specifics if you don't want to. But what are you looking at in condo size and space and expense?
Yeah, so it really depends here what you want to get. Right now, it's just the two of us. So we just got a kind of a normal size condo here, which is really small. It's about 40 square meters. So the space, I went from, I'm bad at conversion, but I think it's around 400 square feet.
Okay. And give or take, I think we'll put that up on the screen later, but I think you're right. That's the way I always do it as well. Like 40, 400. I do that. I don't know if it's accurate, but we'll put it up there.
Yeah, I'm sure there's people watching right now that's saying that guy's not very smart because I got it wrong, but give or take that.
We didn't grow up on the metrics.
Yes, if you live in a condo, they're always small here. So that's, there's 25 square meter places that are studios, and then there might be, ours is kind of middle of the road. I wish I would have got a bigger one now. So we're already looking at, that. But you could expect, it's really so all over the map. But if you're in Cebu City, you could expect to pay between about 100,000 and 200,000, depending on how nice it is and how big it is. Actually, I'm sure that you could get lower than that as well. But it's actually really expensive here when you look at how small they are.
Right.
So you know, my mortgage compared to my rent in San Francisco. In San Francisco, I was paying $5,600 a month just for a 2-bedroom apartment that I did
Right.
not own in San Francisco. So, you know, I went from an extremely expensive place to live in San Francisco to a much less expensive place. I mean, a lot of locals are spending about 5,000 pesos a month for a place, which is like 100 US dollars. So
Really?
you can really get places very, very inexpensive here. If you get up to about 300 or, you know, probably about $300 a month would be seen as kind of a nice place for locals. You know, if you're paying 500 or 600 a month, then you're in kind of like a high-end condo, you know, if you're renting.
Wow.
That would be seen as pretty expensive for locals here.
For local.
Yes. So yeah, it really didn't cost a lot more to buy a place than to rent a place.
Yeah.
So it really just made more sense to start paying off our own place instead of paying off somebody else's place.
Okay. Now, do they, did you get a mortgage from a bank over there? How does that work?
Yes. So you do that here the same as you would in the US.
Okay. And no, did you have any problem opening a bank account in the Philippines?
It's a little bit of a challenge
Is it?
with that, even having a business here. So it took some time, and banking here is a lot different as well. But it was fine. But some of those things that seem really simple could be a bit of a challenge here. You know, in California, if I wanted to deposit a check, I would scan it into my phone
Yeah.
and it would be done.
You're done.
Here, if you go to the bank, you might be sitting there literally for 3 hours, deposit something. So it's a
I think
different
that's
experience.
such a, what you just said, that expectation of time and efficiency that we're
Mhm.
just used to, and we get very pissy about it if it doesn't
Yeah.
happen right away.
Yes.
You have to throw that out the window immediately, don't you, when you go there?
Absolutely, but that's incredibly difficult to do. So sometimes I feel like a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum here, and I'm really trying to learn to be more Filipino, honestly, because I think for me, I won't speak for all Americans because that wouldn't be fair, but I know this American is super impatient, and I didn't realize how impatient I was till I moved to the Philippines because everything takes confusingly long. I just like if I were to try to engineer an experience for things to take as long as they do, I would fail. But it really often takes longer than normal here, and Filipinos know it, and they laugh about it as well. But I really admire people here. They just don't sweat the small stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that they stress about real things in life. You know, people like me, I think I find myself stressing about really simple, kind of stupid stuff.
Right.
Whereas, you know, people here, if they're concerned, it's about, you know, real life problems as well. So I've learned a lot from the culture here, and I have a lot more to learn. That's for sure.
Hey, I wanted to take a moment to let you know about our new book that just came out. It's a great travel journal. If you've been thinking about someplace you want to go, make sure you write it down in this journal. There's all kinds of spaces for places you want to visit, things you want to do, how you're going to get there, what kind of money it's going to take to get there, what type of transportation you're going to use when you get there. Those are the important kind of facts, and there's 101 different places to write that information down and keep it, and just kind of keep it as a nice daydreaming travel journal. I think you're going to love it as much as we do. It's available on Amazon right now. Thanks a lot. So obviously you researched it, you had employees and that sort of thing before you went there. But when you got there, what were some other challenges that you just were not expecting? Maybe they just completely caught you off guard.
Sure. Well, you mentioned employees. So you know, a big part of my life is running 2 different businesses over here, and hiring is a lot different. Work culture is a lot different.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership, management, a lot of those type of things that I felt like I was doing a decent job in California. I feel like I'm starting over from zero in a lot of ways. So in California, you know, I think most people would have thought I was a pretty nice boss. But here, sometimes in comparison, I feel like a big jerk. And
Really?
part of that is not really. I mean, I have a great relationship with my employees, but sometimes I know that I've really hurt someone's feelings, and
Oh,
so here I think that people aren't so direct in communication. They
yep.
kind of take the side road to get to the point,
Yeah.
and I'm I really have always tried my best to be uh as aware as possible of others' feelings and how I communicate things and to show empathy.
Right.
But I just suck at that here in comparison. I've had men and women, crying during conversations over here that truly in the US would be fairly normal. And I think
Mhm.
that's because people care so much here. I think they're so sensitive where they really take things on as quite a weight. And so I've really been in the process. I'm not even going to pretend to say that I figured this out, but really a process of trying to figure out leadership and management cross-culturally here in the Philippines. Sometimes it just gets frustrating. So,
Sure.
it's really different, and time is different. Even with the interviews, sometimes people show up late on Filipino time, as they call it over here, and sometimes just don't show up at all. So those things are really different.
Yeah.
Family is seen as such a high priority here
Hmm.
that that's an excuse for anything that might come up, to
True.
not be at work or to be late. And so, on the one hand, I really adore how much Filipinos love family and the priority that takes here. I think us Americans have a lot to learn
Yes.
from how family truly is here.
Yes.
But then, the flip side of that coin is what that looks like for work and different things like that as well. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so with work, I love my, team here, and overall it's been a great experience, but also a challenge.
So now you've been there a year and a half. Like you mentioned family, but outside of family, which is always everybody's first thing they generally miss, but outside of family, what do you really miss about the United States? Or maybe don't miss. That's another way of looking at it.
Sure. So what I miss about the US is good Mexican food.
Yes.
That's probably the number one thing. I just really miss that there. I love American, food options.
Yeah.
I'm vegetarian, so it was really easy for me in the US to get, really good tasting vegetarian options. Here, very much a meat-based,
Very meat culture
kind of
there, isn't it?
diet. Yes, absolutely. So, that's definitely something that I miss a lot there, but also just options in general. I would love to be able to go to a Best Buy. I
Right.
would love to, be able to take advantage of that Prime shipping on, Amazon, where I have to pay a lot if I want to have something from, Amazon shipped here as well. So we are so spoiled, with things like Amazon, just to be able to get things in a day or two, sometimes even the same day, now, like literally anything you could think of.
Yeah.
I've had things shipped from the US and it gets to me quicker than things that I have shipped within the Philippines. We're just so efficient, and I really miss that as well.
Sure.
Is it a big deal? It's really not in the bigger scope of things, but when you're used to it, it feels like a really big deal at times. So yeah, what do I miss? Absolutely family and, some close friends. Overwhelmingly, after that, food.
Yeah.
Look at me. And then, apart from that, definitely efficiency in all areas of life and just selection. We are so spoiled with those
Yes.
things. And man, if I could bring those things to the Philippines, I would never leave.
You mentioned being vegetarian, and it just sort of made me think of health and that sort of thing. Do you have health care there?
Yeah, I just recently got Phil Health. So I don't know if you would say that's equivalent to Medicare. I guess you wouldn't because you could use it when you're younger, but it's just kind of the standard of what you know, people here have. And then I'm looking at private insurance as well. So our employees have that, but I'm looking at being added to that as well.
Can you give me a sense of how much that costs? Either the you said Phil Health, like Philippine Health, and or the private.
I'm gonna get a very rough guess, but
Sure.
Phil Health is probably not more than $100 a year, and maybe even a lot less than that. But in that ballpark, give or take, you know, $50 probably. And private insurance, it really depends on how much coverage you get, but that will probably be around $400 a year for good coverage.
Wow. So either way, even if you're drastically off, it is extremely cheap compared to here, right?
Absolutely.
Now,
Yeah,
have you used it in any way?
I haven't.
Okay.
I've not needed it even once. So
Knock on
it's,
wood.
yeah, hope. Yeah, it's one of those rare things you pay for that you hope you never have to use.
That's true. Philippines is largely an English-speaking country as well.
Absolutely. Yes. So overwhelmingly people here speak English, especially if you're in a, you know, a bigger city. If you get into smaller areas that are called province areas here, we would probably say like a small country town, you know, equivalent, but they really might be very small here. It's not going to be necessarily that everybody speaks English well, but some. So I think that's one of the things that makes the Philippines stand out amongst a lot of other Asian countries is that virtually everybody here, definitely the overwhelming majority of the population speaks English. Before I came here, I was thinking I needed to study Tagalog, which is, you know, really the national language here. Then what I found out is that if you're living in somewhere like Cebu, where I am, everybody speaks Bisaya or Cebuano. You know, everybody knows Tagalog, but they don't speak it. They're all speaking Bisaya. So I have a Bisaya teacher over here and I'm trying my best to learn the language. And I really need to learn Tagalog as well, just because if anybody's from you know, Luzon, which is where Manila is, they're all speaking Tagalog. A lot of the communications on TV or news are also in Tagalog because everybody speaks that as well. But it's no problem coming over here if you just speak English. It's, you know, pretty much you're always going to have the majority of people that will be able to understand and communicate with you.
So, John, as we wrap up here, first of all, let me a couple of questions. Do you expect to live there forever? Or you have a plan?
Yeah, good question. Plans always change,
Yeah.
but definitely I would see that as a possibility.
Okay.
You know, I'd want to live in California for about a month out of the year just to be able to be with family, and I'm hoping to steal, you know, one or two of them over here as well in the future. But I really can't imagine moving back to the US, at least for the foreseeable future.
Okay. And any words of advice you give to someone who's considering moving to the Philippines?
I would say first come over here, you know, for a trip or two for, you know, as long as you can, you know, at least a few weeks, and really get to know it here, because it won't be for everybody. I love it here, but that doesn't mean other people will, you know, either. And it's not just because it's a different, you know, country. You mentioned living in different cities. You know, I remember traveling with one of my sisters to Vegas. You know, she liked the cost of living and everything there, but when she went there, she just didn't really vibe with it there. And so she decided not to move there. And I think that that type of experience could be here for people as well. So I would do what I did. You know, I came here 3 times in 2019 and just really got to know the people and everything else. And I would say kind of ease into it. But I think you're going to know right away if you will love it here or not. But overwhelmingly, the expats that I talk to here really love the people, really enjoy being here, but they struggle with some of those convenience things and some of the things that are just hard to be more, you know, patient with. So
Sure.
Put your toes in the water, see what you think of those things.
Good advice. Good advice. Now, you mentioned earlier you also have a YouTube channel.
I do.
Is that we can put a link to that? But is that the main place that you post information about living in the Philippines?
It is. So I talk about a lot about life and business in the Philippines as an expat. So thanks for mentioning the channel. It's John Smulo TV on YouTube. Would love to have people say hi there. But I definitely talk a lot more about these types of issues and what it's like to live here. And, you know, I post on Facebook and other places as well. But I love YouTube. And so I think it's, you know, the best way for people to really not only hear, but see what's going on over here as well.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Well, John, thanks so much. This has been so much fun. As I mentioned, my wife being Filipino, it's always been on our top list of things or places to retire to, and even early retire, if not do like you're doing and move there and work there. We both work online, so it's becoming more and more of a possibility. And talking to you is, I think, has moved it up to the top now. I'm very excited about it.
Great. Yeah, I'm definitely hoping to see you guys over here.
Absolutely. Be happy to come visit you. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Hey, I really hope you liked that video. Why not check out some of the other great videos on this channel? And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified every time we upload a new video. Thanks a lot and keep on trekking.